me, a kind of benefit of the lockdown and working from home is that my company has launched this big training platform and offered us so many different soft skill training seminars that I have just dived into headfirst and just, signed up for as many as I really could have. And so the one on communication, for example, where they say that the communication is the responsibility of the person speaking, not the person who's getting the message. And so if your message doesn't go, if it doesn't carry over, it's not the person who's listening's fault, it's actually your fault. So kind of taking on that responsibility when you're communicating to realize, okay, no, I need to do the work. I need to figure out how this person communicates and make sure that I'm doing it in a way that they can receive my message. I think in the last year, I've learned that lesson through the presentations and the trainings that I've done. My name is Sarayyah Baksh. I am originally from Trinidad and Tobago, and I currently live and work in Paris, France. But I've been really lucky in my career as an actuary to have worked in the Canadian and Latin American and now European insurance markets.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you're currently at Chubb in Paris, right? Doing pricing for casualty lines across Europe, I think. Tell me more about that.
It's exactly what it is. So I am currently the casualty pricing actuary for Continental Europe. And so what that means is I'm the person making sure the portfolio is running profitably, making sure that we're setting the right prices, not just on individual accounts, but of course at a portfolio level as well. And actually all of my experience has been in commercial pricing so far, which I really, really do enjoy because I find it is quite actuarial, but also you have to know the business, you have to interact with the business. Sometimes there's not a lot of data, so you need to speak to underwriters to really understand what you're doing and making sure it makes sense with the market you're operating in. And so I really like that balance between business and actuarial.
That's very cool. And what is it like working in Paris? Are you finding it, as you say, you've worked in Paris, I think you've worked in America for Latin America, and then Canada. So yeah, what are the differences?
Lots of differences. So even just beyond the insurance market that you're operating in, you have just your day-to-day life, you have the culture, the language. So I guess I'll start with when I was working in Canada. Of course, I would work in English, and that was also my first real kind of experience as an actuary. So I was just learning and absorbing everything. When I moved to Latin America, I was working in Spanish and English, and I was based out of Miami. And I think at that time, I realized that this is a totally different market. Now I'm working, because I was working for the region, I was working for many different countries, whereas previously I was just focused on one country. So now it's just, wow, my scope was much broader. And in terms of the data that was available as well, LATAM is probably a younger market. And so lots of times we struggle to find the data that we needed, and we had to be really creative as an actuarial team and innovative in terms of figuring out how we can overcome those hurdles there. And then once I moved to Europe, now Europe is a really mature insurance market, and it felt like a kind of a shock to just have so much data. It feels really nice, it just going from LATAM to CE. I think that was the big change from an actuarial point of view, is just the maturity of the market and what that means in terms of what data is involved. And so that's been quite interesting. In particular, in Europe, there are lots of different things about the marketplace. So there are more captives that I find. I have to work with more captives, which isn't something I was particularly well versed in beforehand. So just learning about the specificities of the European market has been pretty cool. And of course, I'm based in France, so there's a different language. Now I'm in France, and after 2 years, my French is really not where it should be. So outside of the office, that's been a challenge for me.
And whereabouts are you in France?
So I'm just outside of Paris. There's a financial sector section of the city called La Défense. And it's just probably like you cross a bridge from Paris and you're in La Défense, maybe 15 minutes on a tram. And so I live very close to the office, so just around that area.
Ah, got it, got it. No, I love Paris. It's actually where I've always wanted to live, but never quite managed to do it. So you're living my dream, many people's dream, I imagine. Yes, yes. That's really cool. And did you find any other cultural differences? I think you're pointing out that the difference is in the markets. There being more data, the markets being much more mature. But as you're working with people trying to influence via pricing and analytics, are you seeing any differences?
Yeah, that's a good question. Once I first moved here, I think I had a lot of learning and catching up to do just in terms of the history of all of the different countries I'm working with and what that might mean in terms of the way that they work and what they're accustomed to doing and the way they like to see data presented and the kind of conversations they want to have. So definitely I've seen some challenges there in terms of culturally, perhaps I think I'm a very direct person. So if I'm working, I'm probably just going to go straight to the point. We'll have a little chit chat and then I want to get to the point and share what I can in the most concise, direct way, which works quite well for some countries. But in other countries, I think being very direct can almost come across rude. And so you kind of have to learn, okay, I probably want to go slower and maybe use, contextualize the numbers a bit more. So how does this impact you? They're not just interested in the number itself, but also kind of giving the backstory and making sure that person is really, really understanding from ground up before just jumping into the conclusion. So just like things like that in terms of your communication, I think that's the real skill there. Learning how to communicate what you've done to people who may receive it in a different way. That's the skill I've had to develop and still is a work in progress.
Yes, I know what you mean. Is this something that you've thought about proactively in terms of your communication style and adjusting it to various workplaces?
I wouldn't say proactively, but I have attended a couple training sessions here and there on communication. And I think that's probably over in the last year as well, because for me, a kind of benefit of the lockdown and working from home is that my company has launched this big training platform and offered us so many different soft skill training seminars that I have just dived into headfirst and just signed up for as many as I really could have. And so the one on communication, for example, where they say that the communication is the responsibility of the person speaking, not the person who's getting the message. And so if your message doesn't go, if it doesn't carry over, it's not the person who's listening's fault, it's actually your fault. So kind of taking on that responsibility when you're communicating to realize, okay, no, I need to do the work. I need to figure out how this person communicates and make sure that I'm doing it in a way that they can receive my message. I think in the last year, I've learned that lesson through the presentations and the trainings that I've done.
Got it, got it. That's super interesting because it leads me on to I really want you to explain this concept that I think I saw you explain in the YouTube video I was watching.
No.
Yes, it was great. I loved it.
Oh boy.
Use the acronym SPAN, which I loved. Can you explain to our audience what that stands for?
Wow, I need to make sure I remember it properly now. So to give some context, that SPAN was something I designed for some students that are in an actuarial program at university. I wanted to get something catchy that kind of hits on the things that I think are important at that stage in your career. And so I came up with SPAN. So that's S for skills, P for professionalism, A for action plan, and N for network. That I really think, so skills would be your technical skills. So actually, and non-technical. So for your skills, I was encouraging students to do your schoolwork, make sure you're doing well in your assignments, make sure you get those technical abilities, and also non-technical. So make sure you can interview well, you can communicate, work in a team, because that's really key. And then in terms of your professionalism, just understanding once you walk into the workplace, who do you want to be? It's not like you have to be someone you're not, but this is a part of you who you may not have interacted with yet at school because you haven't had to be in a professional workplace. So
Mm.
just encouraging students to think about that and visualize who they want to be. A was for action plan. And I think this one is really important because if you don't have a direction, you might just kind of flounder around. So just taking the time to really revisit your action plan. Where do you want to go and what are the steps you're taking to get there? And that's something that we have to do at this stage in our careers too, not just as a university student, but always reevaluating where you're going. And then the N for networking, I was just trying to show them the power of networking, really, because I think sharing your vision with people, letting them know what you want and where you want to go, doors kind of open up for you, and you learn so much if you have a big network and people you can bounce ideas off of, ask questions, ask for advice. Yeah, that was the span.
I think it's brilliant, and I think it's totally relevant beyond when you're just starting out. So, and I wanted to go through the various parts with you. So, skills. Let's start there. And you talked about diving into the soft skills that your employer is offering now. What have you found particularly useful?
I really think the communication for me was useful. I think that was a lesson I probably needed to learn and still need to learn, especially because I like presenting and I want to do more presentations. But so much of it is just what is the message you want to send? And every time I have to present, I stop, and that's really the question I have to answer before I can put anything down on paper is, what's my message? What am I trying to share with people? And I learned that through the trainings that I've been to. Another thing is being opportunity focused instead of challenge focused. And I'll explain that a bit more because I think I might not have been very clear. But it's just when there's adversity or where there's change and something comes up, some people might say, okay, how can I capitalize on this? Is this an opportunity? And just looking for those opportunities in everything instead of just saying, oh, this is difficult and being disappointed and dejected. And a really concrete example of that is I was thinking about even the countries that I've lived in. And I realized that there is no country that I've lived in that I would say, okay, this is perfect, love it. There was always something that I liked and something that I didn't like. And what I realized is I was spending some time, especially when I had a particularly difficult conversation in French, maybe, or something that frustrated me, I was spending my time thinking about what I lost. So, in Miami, I had this and that, and here I don't have it. And then after, spending some time in those trainings, I think it's really a mindset change where I started looking at the things I gained. I'm here in Europe, I'm getting a chance to experience this side of the world, this whole new culture. There are little baguettes on every corner, just to be stereotypical. There's a lot of beauty here. And if I was only thinking about what I lost, I would just continue feeling like I'm losing, but I'm also gaining at the same time. So yeah, I think that's been really, really impactful for me.
That's a very positive change. That's great. That's great. And then I think in the skills, you're right. You also mentioned being proactive at really getting better at interviewing, but that your first interview was horrible. Tell me more. Tell me what happened.
I think I'm kind of, I used to consider myself an extrovert, and I think at that time I was flying high on confidence for whatever reason. And I thought, okay, yeah, an interview, I know this. I don't really need to practice that much. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. And it never even crossed my mind to research the company that I was going to interview with. And so I entered that interview trying to find out about the company. I mean, I was just so unprepared, so out of my depths, that needless to say, I definitely didn't get that job. I didn't get any considerations at all. And I remember leaving the interview just completely cringed, like, did I really just do that? So I had to spend a lot of time after, if you just Google top 10 interview questions and actually practice, what is the message? Again, it comes down to communication. What's the message I want to give? It wasn't, so I think I walked into that interview with the message being, I'm going to show them how great I am. They're going to love me. I'm going to make a joke or two.
That's awesome.
But the message should have been, hey, I want to work for your company because I have these skills and I see that this is how they can change your company for the better. And it was just a really, really naive way to approach an interview.
Got it. Lesson learned. That was your very first interview out of school, right?
I was still in school at the time. It was for an internship.
Got it. I think one of the first interviews I set up for a graduate job, I didn't even show up to. I completely forgot about. So it's better than that. So yes, we all make mistakes.
Definitely.
That's cool. And then persona. I love this part because I have never thought about this, but I think as you say now, and then when I was watching your YouTube video, you were saying, as a student and you're thinking about your professional life, you can look to like maybe the TV or the movies or something of someone you might think of as perhaps a role model. Did you have anyone in mind, or do you?
I think my mom, actually. Don't mean to get all sentimental, but she's just a real superhero in my eyes. So she worked in corporate for a long time, and so from a young age, I was accustomed to seeing her in her business suits. She was always working really, really hard, getting recognized, and very, very conscientious. And she was well respected at a time and in a country where I think women in such leadership positions were very rare. But she never let that stop her. And I think she is the one who showed me that, women, we have our place in corporate and we can absolutely push and excel and should never let that stop us. So I would say it was my mom.
That's so cool. That's very cool to have that role model in your mom. And you mentioned that, yes, in particular for women, and particularly of your mom's generation, it poses its own challenges. So do you have any particular advice for women as they're thinking through this?
That's a really tough question. Sometimes I question that myself, what can we do differently? And I don't want to say something cliche like just do your best and put your head down and excel, because sometimes it's really not that simple. Sometimes the environments are set up in a way where you can do as well as you can and you just don't get recognized. So I think the onus isn't only on women, but it's really on everyone, men included, to recognize that we need to change things. We need to actively think about diversity and inclusion, women and men, different races, different socioeconomic groups, and we really need to take that responsibility on ourselves and educate ourselves. So I guess my advice would be for people to start educating themselves on what they can do. And I really don't have all the answers, but there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of seminars. So yeah, put yourselves in that space and try to learn something about what you could be doing better.
Got it. So maybe back to the skills part of your acronym.
Yeah.
Great. And then action plan. So your action plan actually got you to Paris, is that right?
It did, yeah. Although it wasn't actually my action plan to get to Paris. It just worked out that way. But it came at a time where I was trying to redevelop my action plan. It came at a time where I had just qualified actually for my FCAS, and I think it was actually the same week that I attended the ceremony in Las Vegas that I started that door to Paris started opening up. And actually I realized that the power of the FCAS credential is that if I wasn't a qualified actuary, this position would not have been available to me either. So, that's something I've noted, is there's a correlation between when I got my ACAS and when I got my FCAS, that just a whole different level of opportunities were actually made available to me.
I mean, if I think about the action plan and the fact that yours continue to evolve, what is your current action plan? Do you have one? Have you given any thoughts about your future?
Yeah, and I think over the last year, especially with the pandemic, it kind of brings on this feeling of reflection in all of us. And in terms of my action plan, actually, I'm starting to get really interested in this kind of role that I have in my mind. It's a role in fiction right now, but hopefully it'll become a reality one day, where it's an actuary who is really, really embedded in the business, who's running and driving strategy, getting involved in any and everything. So I think for me, my next role, I would like to see getting probably even more involved in the business and probably a little bit less in actuarial. I don't know what that's going to look like yet, whether it'll be something I can still remain in the actuarial department with, or if I need to just make a total career shift, but we'll see.
That's super interesting. What interests you about that?
I think my parents are both business people. So although they spent most of their career in corporate, they are now small business owners, but really entrepreneurial in the way that they think. And I've spoken to actually a few actuaries recently who've shown me that, okay, as an actuary, we have a strong skill set, but there's so much more out there that we can do. There's so many other places we can contribute, even within an insurance company, that I think I just feel this desire to learn things about marketing, operations. How can I apply what I have now to benefit other departments? It's fascinating, really, to just think about how we can use our skills in different ways.
Would you ever consider then moving into the business side, like underwriting, that sort of thing?
I considered it. I thought about it, and really early in my career, a lot of people were trying to, hey, you sure you don't want to be an underwriter? But I stuck the course in the actuarial profession, and I think underwriting could still be an option for me. Yeah, I wouldn't count it out, put it that way.
That's very cool. I know many great actuaries who've done lots of different things, like underwriting, right? And then come back to actuarial, or yeah. So that's really exciting that you're thinking through all these things. And lastly, networking. I know that you're involved in the CAE, Casualty Actuaries of Europe, right? And
That's
then
right.
also an Actuaries du Monde. So tell me about both of those organizations.
Okay, so the CAE is really just the European branch of the CAS. So what we do, we try to have some meetings in person twice a year, and we try to get like the actuaries in Europe together, do some CPD and that kind of thing. But since I've been involved in it, unfortunately, it's coincided with the pandemic, so we haven't had an in-person meeting yet. But there's a really nice group of people there. We had a virtual meeting last year, and so that's something, if there are actuaries in Europe that are listening in, that you should definitely check out and get involved in. And the Actuaires du Monde, or Actuaries of the World, that's it's more of a charitable organization. It's more of it's geared towards sharing with developing countries, and we call them actuarially developing countries because for whatever reason, maybe they don't have regulations in place or infrastructure, or they just haven't had a big actuarial take up in that country. So we're trying to push the career and push the profession there through knowledge or workshops and trainings. And that's really how I got involved in some of the presentations that I've been making recently, is through Actuaries of the World. So again, if you are listening to this and you're an actuary who wants to give back and push your profession in around the world, and push it in places that it hasn't grown yet, and you want to make some presentations, that definitely suggest you check out Actuaires du Monde or Actuaries of the World.
Great, thank you. And it sounds like a lot of the activities that you're doing outside of your work have been towards a lot of presenting. That's what I'm seeing. So that's a particular interest for you?
Yeah, I talk a lot. So any excuse to talk, I'll take it.
That's cool.
I think I just generally get a nice rush out of presenting, the anxiety beforehand, the regret, why did I sign up for this? And then, actually presenting. and then afterwards saying, okay, that wasn't so bad. I feel good about it. It's always the same roller coaster. There's always that moment where you're like, no, I should have said no. But then after you're like, okay, I'm really glad I said yes.
Yes, I agree with you. I completely agree with you. So thank you for taking me through your span. That was really cool.
No.
I want to go actually now way back to the beginning. So you're from Trinidad and Tobago, and I was looking this up online, has a population of 1.5 million-ish, right? 1.4 million. So not many people. How many actuaries?
Oh, I don't know. But you know what? There are quite a few actuaries actually in Trinidad. But most of them, I want to say 95% or 99% are in life insurance. And that's something I really hope we can change as well. I want more casualty actuarial focus out of the Trinidadian actuaries. And I think it's coming because I think there was recently a legislation change where they now require a casualty actuary to sign off on reserves in some of the insurance companies. So it's coming. So Trinidadian actuaries listening, you better look at the CAS and write some exams.
That's really cool. That's very good to hear. And then in the beginning, I think when I was listening to your other talk, you did a bachelor in mathematics and you actually wanted to go into sports betting. So how did you end up as an actuary?
No idea where you're getting this information from. It's all correct, but wow. I need to look at my digital footprint.
Hopefully this is not like freaky.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, I'm a huge sports fan for whatever reason. Once I could know nothing about a sport, look at one game, and then just get so emotional about it. I'm just like #1 fan after like 2 hours. So I grew up looking at a lot of cricket. That's a really big sport in the West Indies.
I'm Australian, so I understand.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, we're probably long rivals in the history, Jessica, West Indies and Australia, but it's okay. And football, I really like European football as well. And so I thought, how can I get this passion I have in sports and this affinity I have for mathematics and statistics? How can I marry the two? And so I was just thinking about working for one of those big betting companies where you're just so focused on creating the odds and the probabilities. I thought it would be a good fit for me. But like many other people in the insurance industry, insurance happened to me. It just somehow pulls you into that world, and then 5 years later, you're like, oh, I'm still here. So yeah, I just ended up getting an opportunity to be an actuary with a Canadian insurance company. It was Catlin at the time, became XL Catlin, and is now AXA XL. And that's really where the actuarial thing kicked off for me.
Got it. But you actually went to, you studied in Canada, right? The University of Waterloo. Why did you make that decision?
Waterloo has a really, really strong reputation, especially when it comes to mathematics. And so we had actually migrated to Canada, and I did my last year of high school in Canada. So I was always going to do a bachelor's degree in a Canadian university. And then, well, of course, if Waterloo accepts you for a math-based undergraduate, you don't turn them down. So that's how I ended up going to Waterloo, which was an excellent decision. Actually, even as a Caribbean person, there's so many Caribbean people who end up going to University of Waterloo that really helped me with some homesickness that I was feeling at the time. And we just had a nice Caribbean community of people, a lot of who ended up becoming actuaries as well, actually.
I didn't know that. That's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And then, yes, your first job was at Catlin, and then XL Catlin, and then you moved to Miami, I think.
That's correct.
Why did you make that choice?
So at that time, I just started falling in love with the Spanish language. I just really, really enjoyed learning it. It's something that we have to learn in Trinidad, but I hadn't done it for years after moving to Canada. And I just wanted to become fluent. It came to the point where, even working, I wanted to work in Spanish as well. And so I remembered, I was talking to a recruiter and he said, well, what are you looking for? I said, actually, I'm really happy where I am. But if you find something that I can work in Spanish and English, or even just completely Spanish, then you let me know. And well, he said, well, that's impossible. That's not going to happen. So don't worry about it. And so, okay, fine, well, I'm happy where I am. And then I got a call 2 weeks later and he was just like, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe it. I found something. And, when I interviewed with Chubb, it was quite a strenuous interview process and it was all in Spanish and it was challenging. And I really doubted myself at that point. But then afterwards, after hitting the ground running with Chubb, I just realized that this is such a great opportunity for me to work in such a huge global company with such a strong reputation. I think at the time it was right. I was reconsidering my action plan and everything. And when that opportunity arose in Miami, I thought it would be a really great adventure.
And was it?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, I learned and matured so much professionally in those 2 years, especially working in a foreign language. It really gives you a huge appreciation for what it's like to work in a language that's not your first language. Like just reading emails, writing emails in Spanish would take me twice as long as English, and it just making presentations was just so much harder that I'm really happy for that opportunity because it taught me what maybe a lot of people go through when trying to work in English if that's not their first language. And, maybe we don't quite appreciate the difficulty that's involved there if we're just native English speakers.
Yeah, I find it so interesting that you sought this out deliberately. Many people would maybe do the opposite. So that's very cool. Yeah. Did you get up to speed really quickly? Did it become easier after the first year or?
Yeah, I think the first year was really a time of intense learning. And almost as soon as we hit the 1 year mark, and I remember my boss at the time, he told me, he said, don't worry about it, just wait a year. Because I guess he knew that just how intense that role was. You needed 1 year to really go through everything, okay, at this time, this month, we have this project, etc. And then everything really started falling into place after that first year.
That's very cool. You don't sound very risk averse looking through all of your different job opportunities. You've been incredibly proactive and not particularly risk averse. Is that how you would characterize it too?
Yeah, you're probably right. I think I just think we have one life to live, and at the end of the day, I don't want to turn down something that could have been a nice adventure, something that's a learning opportunity. I suppose, yes, there is always some fear of failure embedded in us, but at the same time, I've realized that failure really isn't that bad. I mean, you go for something, chances are you're not going to actually fail. It's never as bad as you think, and you're going to learn so much. I think of it as kind of leveling up. Almost like if you're in a video game, it's going to get hard before it gets easy, and you level up and you just keep leveling up. So yeah, I think that's probably been my approach.
And then after that was your current job in Paris. And was that to live somewhere new or learn a new language?
I had always thought about living in some other completely different part of the world, having been from the Caribbean, but then also kind of stuck in North America. I was just really curious about what it would be like to live in Europe. But not only that, professionally, I think the move was really good for me as well. The portfolio that I manage now is bigger. And as I mentioned before, working in a more mature market, it would have developed different skills in me. And I also really thought, the opportunity to put another international market on my resume would be really, really powerful. And so I think professionally, for me, it was a big draw in moving to France. But of course, also the opportunity to learn a different culture and just see how things are, even though it hasn't really been easy at some points, especially with the language barrier. I'm really happy I pushed myself to do this.
That's very cool. And it sounds like you have very diverse interests. So sports, language, you love doing more on the business side and strategy and communication. Anything I'm missing?
I mean, I think my dog would be upset if I didn't mention her. I do love animals quite a lot. I love animals a lot. And I think in terms of my interest, I'm really interested in like connecting with people and helping people to reach their potential. So I'm not sure if I've done a lot of that yet in my life, but that's something that I would really like to do going forward. And especially the Caribbean in particular is close to my heart. That's my home. And if I can see that region kind of, improve on itself and somehow empower Caribbean people and young Caribbean people so that they know what's out there, they know what career options they have, and they know how to reach their best self, I think that would make me really happy.
That's great. And hence your presentation to the university.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
What do you think they need the most then? Is it just driving that level of awareness?
In the Caribbean, it's a complex question. I think the awareness is probably a good place to start. As I said, there are quite a few actuaries, so the profession itself is out there, and they do know of it. But I think as P&C actuaries, there's work to be done. Yeah, and of course, I can't really comment on all of the issues that the region is facing right now, especially with the pandemic. It hasn't been easy with the tourism. The tourism industry is super important to that region. So I think that there's going to be a lot of work to be done in the next few years to kind of recover from that. But from a young person's point of view, I would say probably the first step is just letting them know what's out there, what career options they even have. And P&C actuaries, I think that's a really good option for a lot of people in the Caribbean.
Yeah, I think it's generally a really great option. So I would definitely agree with you. That is all of the questions I had, Sarayyah. Thank you so much. Is there anything that you wanted to tell our audience?
One question to you, Jessica. It's just in terms of, I think about the youth a lot, and I think about the upcoming actuaries and the students who are figuring out what to do. And I wonder, well, as an actuary, are we competitive? Are we attractive to young people? And what steps we can take to make sure that we remain attractive?
Yeah, good question. I would actually throw that question back to you then. Do you think we're competitive and attractive and that we're teaching things that are relevant?
Yeah, I think in terms of the teachings, definitely what we do is absolutely relevant. And I think the CAS syllabus does a good job of hitting all of the different buttons. So for me, I'm in commercial pricing, but I've done theoretical work in reserving. And I would much prefer that than having only focused on one thing and just on commercial pricing and then just not know how to do something else. So I think in terms of that, it's really, really good. The part that I think perhaps I'm a little bit concerned about, or maybe we can think about together, is just in terms of, we have similar career paths now with your data scientists coming up, and they use similar data, they use similar skills, but I would argue that perhaps the path to becoming a full-fledged data scientist is a little bit easier than having 5 years of exams after graduation as an actuary. So if I put myself in the shoes of a young student who's looking at these two options, that's where I wonder if we're still remaining competitive and attractive to them, just because they may not want to do 5 years of extra exams to be an actuary if there's roughly competitively, an equivalent data science role. So that's just something I've been thinking about myself.
Got it. So I think you're saying, yes, how attractive is the designation versus perhaps a data science degree or master's degree or something like that, right? You think that they end up with a similar career?
It could be. I think my having traveled around a little bit, and I think you from Australia might also have this experience where to become a full-fledged actuary, you don't have to do as many exams. So for example, in France, once you graduate, you do a master's degree and you do a thesis and you become a fully qualified actuary. And I think in different countries, they have different systems that may not require as onerous as 10 exams after we graduate. And so, yeah, I guess in thinking about the way different countries have been doing it, there is always that question about whether we're doing it the right way and whether we will remain competitive in that way.
No, that's a very interesting question that myself and the board have been, working through, as well as all the volunteers that we have, right? What are your thoughts? What would you do?
I think we still need some kind of, I hope I'm not old-fashioned, but I just feel like we still at least need one exam, We need to have that. But in terms of, I'm looking at, like, for example, the Canadian model, where they do have some credits being given as you go through the system, and you can get CAS credits for certain exams before you graduate. I think that's a good model to get people kick-started and help them to see that, once I graduate, there's not as many exams left to do because I've done well in my coursework. I like that model. And maybe there is something there that perhaps moving more of the high upper level exams into the undergraduate degree or something like that could be an option to just reduce the amount of exams that need to be done after graduation.
Yeah, look, that's certainly the model I grew up under. I took the exams in Australia. So I did a bunch of my exams while I was still at university as well. So probably the same number, but just you start them much sooner. Yeah. Which, yeah. So I hear you. I do hear you. Now that's interesting. You know what I was thinking you were going to say was the desire to have more data science content in our curriculum. I think you mentioned that you had done some courses on this to sort of make sure your skills were keeping current. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, at the end of 2019, I just decided, okay, I have interns that I'm managing that have better data science skills than me, and I can't even answer their questions because it's been years since I've looked at Python or R. And so I just did these online courses, and they're free online courses. I used edx.org, but of course you have Coursera as well, and probably other options that I'm not mentioning now. But I thought it was quite helpful for me to just refresh my mind, to be able to just read code and not have to Google every line and figure out what is this person trying to do. That was really, really helpful for me to do. And it wasn't a big investment, probably a couple of weeks you spend on this course, but it really helps me to stay current, which is something I feel as, I feel like I'm in a strange place as an actuary, because I think there are people who are just a few years younger than me who've done a lot of data science at university and who are coming with these skills. And I don't have 10 years of experience on them that'll say, okay, you have so much more experience, it's okay, you don't need this data science experience. I'm kind of stuck in the middle where it's like, you're not super experienced, but you're not a data scientist because you haven't done it at school. So what do? You kind of have to upskill to make sure you keep relevant and keep yourself being an interesting candidate.
Got it. So you taught yourself to code, you taught yourself to build models?
Yeah.
Enough to be dangerous?
I built a fantasy football model, actually.
That's so cool.
I needed the motivation. I didn't want to do something too academic, so I thought, all right, I like football, I'm just going to build it. And it's done quite well. The model has helped me. I'm currently second in the league with 2 games to go. So we'll see what happens if I can overtake and win.
Oh, that's cool. Congratulations. Cool. No, thank you for sharing. And you have a great question. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much. I'll let you get back to your day. I really do envy you living in Paris.